All right. Greetings, educators. Here we are on Unit Chapter 8 9. I guess you know by now I combined the unit. And I'm going to cover this lecture in 4 parts. There'll be 2 parts for Chapter 8 and 2 parts for Chapter 9. I mentioned to you in an email that there was going to be a lot of information coming in this unit. Uh, I want to suggest to you that you should take notes and you should do the prep work for this unit in chunks. I think it'll make it a lot easier for you. All right, so I'm going to get started. We're going to talk about the history of education in the United States. Um, it's pretty interesting how we got here today, from the colonial times up into the 21st century. So, over time, the citizens of the United States have developed the most universal and popular system of education in the world. We have come to view education as a public good that is essential to health that is essential to the health of the nation. So, how did this happen? How did we get where we are today? Um, First, we have to think back to how the education system of the U.S. came to fruition. There have been select influences on American education back from the ancient Romans. The Romans wanted young people to receive an education that provided them with useful knowledge. And in the Middle Ages, we witnessed the development of an important work that divided knowledge into subject areas. And then we come to the Reformation age, which gave us universal education. And your book talks about all of these. They are important to know, especially the Romans and the Greeks, and how they are still influential to education today, especially the Socratic method of learning and teaching and learning. Okay, your book also talks about the Native American influence on education, and I found this particularly interesting since I hadn't heard this before. So I got to learn some new stuff that I hadn't come across before about education, and I think that topic of Native American influence on today and on the American education system would be a good thesis for a master's thesis or even doctoral dissertation. But that's beside the point, right? And so, anyway, the next thing that we're going to talk about in this chapter is we're going to talk about the people who have been influential in today's education and how it came about. And the first person that we need to talk about is Francis Bacon. Francis Bacon helped establish the idea that truth can be challenged and modified through observation and careful weighing of evidence. Okay, and so up until Francis Bacon's time, students sat at the feet of the teacher and they didn't challenge what that teacher had to say. Um, and so he brought about a revolutionary idea that students could challenge um, their teachers by observing and learning and weighing the evidence carefully and forming their own ideas about the understanding of that observation. Okay, so Comenius promoted the idea of organized learning into sequential and graded schools, and so also that was revolutionary. And then Pestalozzi suggested that schools should take uh, place in a caring atmosphere. Okay, so this is hugely revolutionary because up until this time, um, students sat at the feet of their teacher. They didn't challenge that teacher. The teacher was all knowing, and discipline was very strict, and there was the students and children at that time were almost a commodity, and they kept their mouth shut and they were there just to learn and observe. Froebel worked hard to convince people that young children should have a well planned educational experience. And so we begin to see curriculum begin to develop out of him. And then comes Herbart, I can't say his name, I have difficulty with it, um, who developed a standardized format for lesson plans. And so if you don't like lesson plans, you can blame it back to Herbart. Um, and they are a controversial subject. Okay, so um, many of our educational traditions have evolved from European practices, which is interesting too. Um, we gain from the Europeans how to organize content under major categories. We learn to divide knowledge among individual subjects, and teach in instructional groups like advanced learners, slow learners, etc. And they organized schools into sequential grades. All right, and then the Europeans also educated for the masses, and they planned for individual differences. The Europeans also uh, thought that schools should help learners develop rational thinking processes. And they also believed that teachers should have specialized training. And so here we are today, right, in our education classes about education, right? Schooling, the Europeans believed, should be a preparation for responsible citizenship. And you'll also see Dewey talk about that too. Um, Schooling, from the European standpoint, should provide people with the understanding and skills that they needed to take into the adult workplace. Um, okay, so let's move on and talk about how education evolved across the United States and through the era of colonialism into the 21st century. Some major events in education bring us to today. Um, One of those was Ben Franklin and his revolutionary school, the Franklin School, right? Where he took school into a new period and a new era. And out of that, we moved into the Independence War. And your book talks about the Franklin School, and I highly suggest that you go look at it because it was revolutionary. Um, and then we move into the Independence War, the time between the Independence War and the Civil War, where there's a development, the development of secondary education, and this was a major thing. This development of secondary education, and we also see the Boston English Classical School come out of that period, and thus we come to the work of Horace Mann, who brought us the common school and the normal school. Um, and then we come to the period between the Civil War in the early 1900s, where we have the Kalamazoo case, right, which established public funding for secondary schools, thereby increasing secondary school enrollment. I'm going to stop here now. This is going to be part one of your four-part series, and I'm going to come back and we're going to talk a little bit about African American education during the time from the colonial period up until the 21st century. All right, see you in Unit 2, Lecture 2. Stop.